Good morning to everyone. Thank you, Mr. Venkataraman, for that kind introduction, and thank you everyone on Hyderabad chapter, and especially my good friend, um, Mr. Sharma. He never spares a moment to somehow lock me. COVID is certainly one of the most acknowledged standards, IT governance standards. But the sad part also is, it is like the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible, or to adopt it as such is not possible in life. So it's more of a guidance, and unfortunately, that is where the confusion comes in. Everybody thinks we can implement COVID. That's a very wrong statement. You can never implement COVID. You can only use the framework and implement your own, arrive at your own framework that is fit for your organization. And you can draw a lot of inspiration and guidance from COVID. So that is exactly how COVID stands out. For quite some time, COVID has reigned as the supreme framework for IT governance. In fact, many of us also refer to it as the standard. Is actually not a standard. The difference between a standard and the framework, as many of us clear, the standard is something which is a mandate. You have to implement it as it is. Whereas in a framework, it provides you a model, and you can adopt that model. You can fine tune that model to your way of working. So there is no, in typical words, a mandate as such. However, one of the big downsides of COVID earlier, since long time, has been that it is not a benchmarking model. That is how it was till version 4. And 4.1 was introduced, and that is where it changed things, because 4.1 by far was one of the most popular versions of COVID. Now, for many of you, when we are talking COVID, and what is this COVID? How did the word come? Actually, when ISACA started with working on COVID and released the first version somewhere in 2012, it was more of a audit framework. That's the reason, if you see the word, the acronym expands to control objectives. The control C objectives OB for information and related technology was the exact phraseology, the way that it was framed. But then obviously what has happened is that COVID has certainly grown much beyond from an assurance framework into a typical governance framework. In fact, it has now encompassed almost every dimension of IT that one can imagine. And that is where we'll see that how the 38 dimensions have been incorporated within that. So the next question obviously comes that how much has it been used? Well, COVID has been very widely used by auditors, especially, in fact, you take most of the government audit department, which is the, especially in our country, CAG, the Office of the Comptroller and Auditors General, was one of the first to adopt COVID for audit purposes. And it is still being used very extensively. However, when it comes to industry adoption of COVID, 4.1 took off very well. In fact, starting with 3 till 4.1, it took off very well. But then what has happened is, again, this is a market wherein, once somebody comes out with one kind of framework, everybody tries to see that they also build out to the framework. So there have been many other popular frameworks which were more focusing on other aspects, but have also included several governance aspects. So obviously the customer is confused to say, what should I do with this? But then the good thing also is that when somebody has a problem, I think then you start really, asking which is the medicine for this. Then okay, this solution will help you with this. Otherwise, if somebody tells you, no, you should eat one, amla daily. That's what they are telling you now. No, you don't care actually, because you really don't know, you're in good health, you have no big problems. So always, as they always say, the necessity is the mother of invention, and a problem that you face or a requirement that you face is what really makes you run for that solution. So I would always think that in the two broad types of implementation of COVID that has been, when I say COVID, I'm meaning COVID, not COVID. So whatever has been happening right across, the two broad kinds of implementation. One is organizations say, a request if you can put your mics on mute, please.
What makes you think you these kind of people are the serial kind of people?
I request all the participants to keep themselves on mute.
No, make everybody on mute except Vikas. That's better, Praveen.
Yeah, Sharad sir, you are the host now. Can you do it, please?
Yeah,
I'll do that.
Let me see. I'll just see where that is.
I'll try to mute. Yeah, don't worry.
Leela.
I'm not able to find that option. Anyway, I think now it is fine. Let me see. So the point is there are two broad kinds of implementation of COBIT. One is organizations, they have a need and they go in for a COBIT implementation, which is very good, but very less. Because smaller organizations generally don't tend to care too much about governance. But yes, medium and large organizations, they find it very difficult to manage a large enterprise with a lot of people spread over different geographies. So that is a very big problem, which of course presents as a very good case study for COBIT also, one of the case studies. But there is also another kind of COBIT implementation wherein, because one of the RFP may say you have to be COBIT compliant, or somebody says, no, this is a good standard to have, let us implement. So this is, I would think, a kind of suicidal attempt, honestly speaking, because when you are focused on compliance, you know how ISO 27001 gets implemented. I don't need to tell you that, because somebody will call you and say, we want to apply for this RFP. Within 2 months, I want the certificate to be here. You know what kind of implementation will happen. Similarly, COBIT, especially if you are trying to implement it in such a short range, I can guarantee you it will fail. Why especially COBIT will fail? Now, COBIT is a people process. Very few people think that, oh, it's technology. It is nothing to do with technology, honestly. It is understanding the nuances of technology, the risks and opportunities of technology, and how we can bring in a framework to maximize the outcome of investment in technology. But it primarily focuses on information. In fact, especially 2019 version split information and technology separately, because earlier it was information and related technology, but they have now made it very clear we are looking at information and technology. So that reason being, because there are technologies which are much beyond just information technology, but driven by information technology, like drones and autonomous cars and all. So we are going to a completely different kind of league altogether. So the big challenges that most organizations were facing is, I mean, you can find typical examples of organizations who have started COBIT and never ended. So it is like that, story which never ends, a mega serial, right? And that is where the whole problem is. And that happens because of the lack of clarity on why did we start with COBIT. So the purpose is not really defined, the objective is not really defined. And that's exactly why the problem happened. If somebody is going to say that, let us implement all the 38 domains of COBIT, you are certainly asking for suicide. There is absolutely no two doubts about it. So this requires a huge amount of collaboration within the organization. But let me tell you one thing, a handful of organizations which have taken certain aspects of their problems and certain parts of COBIT and implemented, they have reaped rich benefits. Because see, there are problems organizations face which have no solution. See, I'll tell you, when about 15 years back, one of my friends who heads the compliance for one of the largest IT software vendors in the world, he is located off Chennai. He told me, Vittal, see, we have got ISO 27001. We do SOC audits every, twice a year. We have CMM implementations which are happening. Of course, I have ISO 9001. I got several other standards which are getting implemented, but I don't have control. So he says, what is the point if I'm, having all this and 60% of my entire team time is spent only on these audits and trying to keep our certification alive. And in most cases, the way that certifications get closed is also pathetic, because I know that there is no control. We are trying to close things, which is not correct. So he says, what do we do with this? So I said, then go for a standard which is not mandated. At that time, COVID was not really a benchmarking standard talking about, but then they went in for that, and we only took a very limited aspect of it, and it was found to be extremely useful, wherein we only looked at the investment delivery areas vis-a-vis the portfolio management of projects, and that was extremely useful for the client. So this is how there can be very useful implementations where you can find COBIT providing the answers for especially long drawn problems, chronic problems that organization is facing vis-a-vis management and governance of IT. So the slides that I have are mostly from ISACA, because I'm sure many of you have not even got introduced to COBIT. So this is one of the slides which I've been using in many chapters for introducing COBIT. Of course, as you would know, even if you're not a member, you can download the introduction of COBIT. Anybody can simply to the ISACA site and download the instruction of COBIT. If you're a member, certain parts or certain publications are free for members. You get a licensed copy in your name. You can go and download it. Of course, there are certain parts which are priced, so you would have to look out for that. So it depends upon what your need is. Not only that, there is a COBIT online version which also helps you to implement the various phases of how you take this implementation project along. On the website, you will find a few case studies, not really many, but significant work on COBIT is happening in certain parts of the world. I won't say all. COBIT 4.1 was replaced by COBIT 5 version, but very soon what happened was COBIT 2019 was also announced. So today COBIT 2019 is the latest that stands out. So COBIT 5 was again a significant expansion over 4.1, and in fact several things moved on that. We'll discuss about certain aspects of that. So the point ultimately is, why should you need COBIT is the first question you should ask. So don't say that you need COBIT. You define your problem or define your requirement. It could be a chronic issue that you're handling in an organization. And once you are able to identify the problem clearly, then you can start looking for, does this thing called COBIT really provide any solutions? Will it have any solutions for my long drawn management and governance problem? I think you will invariably find a solution there. And another important rule is, if you're trying to find a solution, don't start with saying that, oh, I have to take COBIT as it is and implement. No, it is not necessary at all. COBIT is a guidance, it is a reference model. You can build out your own whatever you feel that will be fit for your organization size. And that is what COBIT also permits, because you can make use of all the knowledge. There is tremendous amount of knowledge that is there in the, in fact, entire COBIT literature. There are several parts to that. In fact, somebody, if you can go through that, you'll almost gain the spectrum of everything that happens in IT from a management and governance point of view. And each and every dimension is dealt with in significant amount of detail, what we call as focus areas now. Anyway, so let's get into COBIT with this. I'd be happy to have any questions if in between, but if there are certain urgent questions, we can take it in between. Else, we will go to the end of the session and take it. So let's get along. So the big question also the industry has been asking is, okay, you had COBIT 4.1, then you had COBIT 5, now you have COBIT 2019. Why one more version of COBIT so soon? That's big question. And the important thing, in fact, I always keep saying, which is my experience. In fact, we have been working with one of the clients earlier, and we almost were looking at midway through of COBIT 4.1 implementation. COBIT 5 came in, management said, let's go ahead with 5. So of course, with significant changes, we went ahead with the framework changes to 5. But by the time we were nearing the 60%, 70% mark on that, COVID 2019 was announced. So the management got vexed. They said, what is this? We just had one more version of COVID. So it is almost like COVID here now with various variants. Not a good comparison, certainly. But when you look at this, the interest of why 2019 needed to come had a very strategic reason from ISACA's perspective. But at the same time, there have been tremendous work which was going on since COVID-5. And obviously they wanted to encash on this entire thing and also align themselves with several standards, because between COVID-5 and COVID 2019, a whole lot of activity worldwide had taken place on IT assurance, IT governance, data privacy, and management standards as such. So that is one of the key reasons that ISACA thought it fit that it should be important that any framework that comes out now is aligned, because COVID itself always has been known as the umbrella standard. It provides that basic, framework within which you can work with ISO 27001, ISO 9001, or SOC 2 or CMMI, whatever. You can work with all that because it covers the entire spectrum of the governance umbrella. That's what it does. So anyway, we'll take a look at the overview and the key concepts and briefly look at, permitting upon time, how the performance measurement really works in COVID 2019, and quickly sift through some aspects of implementing COVID. So why COVID? I already answered that to say that unless and until you have a need or a problem, I would think unless your organization has the wherewithal and looking at, yes, this is something we need to do about it, I won't think that somebody should really take COVID as such and still start ahead. It's not a good thing to do. So it's always good to start with a very clear problem statement or need statement, and then certainly you look for answers, and then you'll be able to find the answers there. So what drove the development of 2019? So here is what I had also briefly explained. One was looking at how to optimize the information and technology governance. So that has been looming large because within the last couple of years, the pace with which technology has been invading business has been mind-boggling. So that is where ISACA took cognizance of that and said that we got to also recognize that we are not merely dealing with some computers alone here, but the digital technologies are going into IoT, ICT, and a whole lot of things. So we need to take cognizance of all that, because ultimately each of these technologies needs to be managed, needs to be governed. So that is where the idea was to stay relevant in the changing environment. And when we say changing, lot of regulations have come in the recent times as regards IT security and privacy. Not only that, the idea also was, since we already have a good framework, which is COVID-5, so look at how we can strengthen and meet all these add-on objectives. And also there was a lot of feedback on COVID-5. Actually, COVID 4.1 was more stable according to me. COVID-5, because there was significant amount of research and academic research really went in a lot into that, but many of it was yet to be tested in real life situations. Because I mean, let us look at it. If you want to get your team to even implement a simple ISO 27001, you can imagine that nobody really considers this as a priority unless and until somebody really tells you that this is what got to be done. So everybody thinks, no, production is priority. All these all can look at it. It is like the doctor asking you to go for a walk daily or do some yoga exercises. You say, I don't have time for all that. So obviously you're not going to get well. So this is where I think the problem really was to see that not getting implemented, or in spite of people putting in effort, it was not happening. So they said we had to also look at the imperfections and correct COVID. Now, so what happened, another important change was the movement from IT, information technology, to information and technology. Now it may look a little silly, but actually there's a huge difference. See, if it was a technology standard, it will be like an NIST technology standard, which we can only take a few technology and discuss on that. But that was not the intent. The intent was, if you look at an enterprise using technology, why do they use that? Obviously, they are looking at primarily with regard to the digitization, information handling. The whole spectrum changes, the customer experience changes, the way that you run your organization changes, the efficiency changes, effectiveness changes, everything changes. When you start introducing newer technologies, like today we have so much of, the ICTs happening. So again, there is a whole lot of thing to be done from a technology management perspective, which is very closely aligned with the job of the IT, but not just the IT, but also the shop floor or whatever. So they said we have to take cognizance of something that's so vehemently coming. And that requires, as you see in the left-hand side bottom, enterprise governance over IT, which is the larger subject. So wherever you have information and technology, we need to make sure it falls within an enterprise framework. And it got to be very clearly business aligned. And this is very important. See, I'm sure if you go to any organization today, you ask them, are you using AI? They'll say, yeah, we are doing so many projects on AI. And if you ask them, how are the projects performing? Nobody knows. What are you going to expect the business benefit out of the project? Nobody knows. So there are many organizations who are kind of, if I can say, in a kind of looking at adopting a technology, really being clear about do we have the objective clear? And where the objective is clear, do we have the raw material for that? For example, if you take analytics, obviously you need good amount of data, but then unless and until your data that would be generally lying in backup tapes in traditional organizations, you are able to pull them all into one particular data lake or whatever, and then normalize it, cleanse it. You cannot use any amount of this data. And after all that, you don't know what you'll get, because many of the fields may not just be available, which will be important for insights. So these are common problems that many organizations face. So what happens is that there is no business alignment vis-a-vis most of the IT projects. In fact, you can ask most of the CTOs, they would tell you when it comes to application projects, and especially in-house or which are customized, they keep on going. And there's always a scope creep. It keeps on changing. And especially given today, the marketing or the front-end team keeps on coming out with newer and newer demands. So all this is kind of certainly changing. So that's why it is very important to have this absolute clarity on business vision for every technology project. And ultimately, after having invested all this, it has to result in value creation. And that is where you will be shocked to find that many of the ML AI projects, they never see the light of the day. They are just shelved somewhere in between, or they don't meet the requirement, or there is some handicap which comes up. So these are very, very common problems that come up as such. So when COVID-5 really started, and then we went on, actually we had COVID-5 from 2012, and then we tech business trends, which have been last 10 years, they have been significant. Then the challenge of integrating insights from various practitioners, lot of research that has been going on in piecemeal across, and a lot of, as I said, new standards and frameworks had to be aligned. So this was one part of it. But the good things also were there, because you had COVID as a unique overarching IT governance framework. It was accepted worldwide as such. The process guidance was in a pretty mature state. So in fact, I'm sure many of you would have used the COVID processes in the earlier version of COVID. And now we call them as management objectives. And if you really look at it, there is so much of insights that many of you would have used and gained out of that. Of course, the most important differentiator in COVID is it talks business everywhere. It talks about what is there for business in this. So that's the reason you will find that everywhere the business alignment will come in. And one of the key problem also was that when it came to using COVID, as I said earlier, it started only with assurance, and then some IT guys taking over and trying to run it, but never moved beyond certain aspects of IT. It never got really to the business side to solve the business expectations from technology or the disappointments from technology. So that is why it was certainly something which was to be looked at from that perspective. So they wanted to enlarge this to meet the business dimension purpose. See, strategically at the back end, what was happening in ISACA also was that ISACA took over CMMI. And that was a huge acquisition because CMMI, as you know, has several standards which are quite popular. The CMMI standards are very, very popular. So the idea was CMMI's popularity with the boardroom or with the leadership was known. So the idea was that why don't we also align the entire framework of COVID 2019 to the extent of possible with the framework of the capability maturity model, so that you have a win-win on both sides, so that organizations can also, because there was a long-standing demand to say, can we use COVID to get, certified, or there's nothing called as actually COVID certification, but they said, can we do something like that? So that way they brought in the capability maturity model, which kind of now aligns with this. Of course, there has been an opportunity to rediscover, relaunch. It's a, well, this is something which I will not accept completely. More usable implementation. If you have to make it usable, you have to make it usable. Then only it becomes usable. So that is where you need a lot of consultants. So I'm sure all of you will be seeing a lot of opportunities if you are able to channelize the evangelization of COVID well. The one other aspect was the problems with the current COVID. Many COVID users said they are just finding so difficult to really locate a content which which they are searching for. It is perceived as complex and challenging to really put in practice. We had a lot of discussion on enablers, but enablers never had any guidance. For those of you who may be familiar with the earlier version of COVID, there was something called as enablers, and there were 7 enablers. We'll discuss some of them later, which did not have a guidance earlier. Now there is. So then again, the process of measurement was very tedious. So the capability module or whatever that was done was not really in good shape. Then, of course, the IT governance itself was moving place to place. So obviously there was too much of changes and overhead that was already built around all this. So if you see one of those aspects which you discussed, the number of standards that now COVID 2019 has been considered by this development team, there are significant. I'm sure you can see, I don't want to go and read through each of them, but it considers every dimension right from corporate governance to NIST technical standards to, of course, ISO family of standards on both security, your process management, etc., etc. It also aligns with the PMBOK, the TOGAF architecture. Some of these are very, very popular, as we know. Then, of course, COSO, which was obviously the de facto standard for internal control and enterprise risk management. Then we had ITIL, High Trust Framework. So it kind of completely looked at all that. And of course, as I said, the key thing was also to align with CMMI, which was now part and parcel of the family of ISACA. So quickly coming to where we stand today with what is COVID 2019. First of all, the digital transformation age really took over. And that is where I think every organization now was strategically looking at how do you go about transforming your organization digitally. And that is where I think the important dimension of segregating information and technology, while understanding that both of them are pretty well married together, and how they crucially support the growth of the enterprises, what really came in. And I'm sure we have seen simple examples are Amazon, which kind of throughout a 200-year-old book business of Higginbotham's and Barnes and Nobles, which was done manually and physically dealing with books. Overnight, they threw them out with just some 100 square meters of space or whatever they had. And all that was how technology can create a devastating change to a business proposition. And this is where interested many organizations. In fact, if you really looked at it, the wave that started with the digital transformation kind of, initially hyped but many enterprises looked at significant cost savings, significant customer experience changes. And I'm sure you and me have been beneficiaries of this change, which has happened, right? Starting from our mobile banking application to the Aadhaar based systems or whatever that we have been looking at. So the point really was that earlier, if you see, one more problem was that the boards never really knew what was their job with regard to, I and T related decisions. So there was a lot of muddling between the words of governance and management. In fact, the big challenge also was that in the meantime, many corporates were coming under the regulation which required boards to take charge of IT risk management and IT security. So that completely changed and pushed the boardrooms into thinking, what do we need to do? Because we need to get control over this IT, otherwise it's going to be a big problem. So it kind of started with that spark. And that is where they found COBIT to be extremely useful, because it talked the same language. It talked about governance, right? And obviously, one key thing which also came out was, with digitization, the dependence of an organization on anything to do with technology was so high that there was obviously no reason to really see, if you have not taken care of the business continuity angle, you could be in deep soup. So this is how it stood out to be. Now, of course, the big question always remained, how do we maximize stakeholder value creation? And digitization threw up very enticing benefits, because you had tremendous cost savings. Because if you automate, today, if you really look at a very simple technology like robotic process automation, and the kind of cost saving and the efficiency that it has brought into several of the routine processes, organizations now, there is no way of going back, and thanks to the pandemic, it has only accentuated that. And there are newer business models. If you really look at how the position of SWIFT as the monoliths across the world for any fund transfers, banking fund transfers was accepted, it has been completely broken now, thanks to a very simple thing like Ripple or the blockchain system that has completely changed the very remittance model. I mean, these days you don't even talk about saying, most banks even are moving away from SWIFT and they are trying to look at Ripple-based systems or several things. So lot of innovation leading to lot of value creation which is happening. So the other focus that had to be brought in was, because information and technology, looked at it, was kind of centrally controlled by a department called as IT department, and everybody else thought that this is none of my botheration. If everything or anything goes right or wrong, it is this department's problem. So that was one big risk, in spite of the fact that IT departments were more custodial departments, as we know. And the primary business owners were obviously the data owners, and they were supposed to be spearheading the information related strategies of any enterprise. And that is what had to be balanced with the risk to make sure that you have value creation. So when you really looked at it, what was required was, if you take, for example, a large bank like State Bank of India, see, the person who is sitting at the counter in one of the most rural branches, the customer feedback that he gives vis-a-vis maybe a mobile app or with regard to an ATM is as important for us to shape the customer experience. So unless and until every part of your organization participates in the digital journey, it would almost be impossible to really achieve this. So that is where the enterprise governance of information and technology as a facet really came to the fore. And that is what ISACA truly recognizes as part of COBIT 2019. And if you really look at it, the corporate governance regulations have been very clear. In fact, in India, if you take the Companies Act requirements, they're very clear. You got to have a very robust risk management system, and you should be able to very clearly articulate what are your key risks in every financial statements, the audited financial, as part of your audited financial statement, that is as part of your board report. You must outline that very clearly. And obviously the auditors are to make sure that this risk management and the internal control systems are working fine. So lot of, I think, corporate governance requirements also point to information technology being an integral part of the business and obviously needs to be very effectively governed. And that is where the board's role comes in, because you got to really oversee all this and see how the implementation of processes, the structures, the related mechanisms, the entire framework, as we call it, needs to be put in place. And it kind of where, I have personally found COBIT to be extremely useful is, see, there is one big divide always traditionally between the business side and the IT side. The business side will always say that the IT side doesn't understand its perspective or requirements. And that's the reason these kind of conversations become more loud when our projects fail. And the IT side always sees these guys don't know how to define the requirements. This is a traditional war that has been happening right across. And there are obvious fundamentals to that, because IT, they always speak their jargon. And business sense is something which the IT doesn't get unless and until the IT head has been somebody who understands his business very closely. So there is always this disconnect which keeps on happening. So that is where I think COBIT has been very effective right from its first version to bring in this common language. This common language has been the need over ages, and that is where I think it kind of looks at whose responsibility is what and brings in several aspects to that. It also obviously enables creation of business value from an information and technology. It treats IT investments as business investments. And that is where, if you see, this graphic clearly comes out. Because fundamentally, when we say enterprise governance over IT, which means that you're talking business now, because you are more and more dealing with business side, but looking at extracting value out of digital transformation. So how do you look at it? For example, let us say your bank gives you a mobile banking app. Obviously, the first question is, what is the benefit in it for me? But then there are two silent expectations in any IT project or digitization project. There is a basic expectation when you are using the mobile app that by default, it is the bank's prerogative to ensure that the mobile app is safe. Now, you don't go and say that the app should be safe. In fact, how many of us would go to a bank and at the time of opening your account, ask this question, are you a safe bank? You would not ask this question, because if it's a bank, you're supposed to be safe. And that is where the risks got to be managed. So that is where risk management is something which is obviously today not just banks, but any enterprise. Risk management is a very, very fundamental part of your governance exercise. And all this, obviously, we have been, especially our country, we have been used to everything getting free. So if you have to pay for an app, obviously that's a no-go. So the organization needs to find its own, funding to see how to fund the project or how do they get the best out of it. So obviously they have to look at how they can enhance the customer experience, make the customer, relationship more stronger through more adoption of their products, etc., etc. So that is where resource optimization comes. So these are the three important facets to any relationship. When it comes to the information and technology side, A, benefits realization, B, optimization, and C, risk optimization and resource optimization. I've been speaking for quite a while. Maybe I thought I'll just stop here for a minute to check if anybody may have any questions. I don't see any questions on the window. I'll just stop for a minute. If you have a question, you may just please post it on the chat window. Is it going fine so far? Is it meeting your expectations?
Fine, sir.
Thank you. So if there are no further questions, till the next stop, I'll go ahead. Thank you. So now we'll start complicating this a little further, because as I said, IT governance has more of management jargons. And the problem with management jargons is we seem to know everything. But when we are faced with the situation and we have to clearly articulate this, we are at loss of words. So that is a problem with any governance and management related terminology. So that is something we'll need to handle as part of that. So when now we are marrying the technology side and the governance, the business leadership side, obviously we have to have absolute clarity of common language. So that is where when we talk about goals of an organization, imagine the person who is heading the IT, his clarity on the business goals of the organization, his clarity about what changes he has to bring about in his IT department to meet the changing business plan of the entity. These are sensitive issues, and not all CTOs or CISOs are well placed to understand that. There will be a handful of organizations who clearly, obviously have all that in them. So that is where it is very important to get these basic, fundamentals cleared. See, for example, there are two clear nature of responsibilities that COBIT deals with. One is the governance level responsibilities, which is what we call as the board level. Well, it is sometimes a little more than the board also. And second is the executive level responsibilities, which is typically the management, the executive management. Now, how do we understand this in simple language? I would take a very simple anecdote. I'm sure all of us have been in a passenger ship, or at least we know how it looks like. The Titanic you might have seen. We don't want to be in a Titanic, but then you know how the passenger ship looks like, which is called as a cruise. Now, if I ask you the question, who is the person in command of the ship or the cruise? I'm sure you'll not blink an eyelid and you'll tell me it is a captain of the ship. And then there is a team that supports the captain. There is a head of navigation. There is a head of fuel management. There is a head of hospitality. There is a head of electricals. There is a head of so many aspects that need to be managed in a very large ship. But you will clearly see the person who has the least physical work will be none other than the captain. And obviously he is the maximum paid. So this looks very, very out of place, isn't it? Some fellow who is sitting there on the top deck doing nothing and getting paid. So looks very, very unacceptable. But the fact remains that when it comes to the governance or the board level, it is like the captain of the ship. The captain, imagine a ship without a captain. It is like a headless chicken, will keep on going everywhere. So the captain plays a very important role, and that is what COBIT clearly defines in three broad objectives. One is evaluate, second is direct, and third is measure. What does it mean? See, look at the captain's job. He has to continuously look for any storm that may be, likely on the path of the ship. Or he may also be getting messages to say there is a huge cargo which needs to be shipped immediately, but you have to take a small detour to that particular port, and there could be significant profit for the, the shipping enterprise as such. So obviously he has to take cognizance of these opportunities and threats. And he has to take a call, a strategic call, and give directions to the management to say, yes, this is what we are going to do next, and prepare for that. So for example, let us say there is a deviation that the ship has to take off its course. It has to anchor at a particular port, collect the cargo, then move on. Now, there are a lot of things that need to be managed. The original schedule needs to be managed because there are passengers on the ship. Then there should be even fuel management and food, etc. What needs to be done, all this needs to be managed. So obviously, this direction of changing the course goes to the second level, which is all the management team. And the management team now, based upon the direction, starts working at each of their levels of management on each aspect that is essential for achieving this outcome of this changed journey. So that is where, if you see, the role of the management and the role of the governance are very clearly defined. The governance has to do with continuously evaluate the external and internal environment for opportunities and risks. Now, obviously, to take a risk-balanced decision and communicate the direction to the management. What does the management do then? The management takes this direction and then plans, builds out what needs to be done to implement that plan, operates that plan, and monitors that plan at their level to see that their departmental objectives are getting achieved. and give the feedback back to the top management, the board, wherein now the board measures these with regard to business outcome and sees, yes, these are getting achieved or not. So this is how these two operate clearly. So all this was a very clear, I think, example of how the roles of the governance and management of any organization got identified with what they need to do vis-a-vis technology. So that is where, if you see today, COBIT is a framework, and we clearly say it's a framework because a reference model typically. For what? That is where we just discussed governance and management of what? Enterprises, information and technology. In fact, I'm sure those of you who have followed COBIT 5 or COBIT 4.1, there is something called as information architecture. Can you tell me if one organization has an absolute clarity on inventory of information? I am sure that maybe one or two organizations alone may have, any effort in that direction. Otherwise, even an IT asset register is not available. Please understand, you cannot manage or govern what you don't know. So that is why it is important, while technology may be accounted for, but information unfortunately is not accounted for. And today, given the kind of ecosystem where we are all cyber oriented, which means we are a connected kind of ecosystem, there is data which is flowing in and out of the organization amongst partners and God knows what all. If you take your simple transaction wherein you buy something on Amazon or Flipkart online and pay using your banking system, imagine the number of partners who come into play. So you can imagine, how do we make sure all this runs as a well-oiled machinery, achieving all the business management objectives and the governance objectives, ultimately delivering to the stakeholder needs. This is exactly what COBIT does. COBIT clearly defines the components vis-a-vis what a governance system should take or how should be designed. It also considered what all you should consider as an organization, irrespective of its size. You may be a startup, mind you, you also need some governance. Only thing is, it happens because it's a small enterprise, you somehow manage it personally. That is different. But the moment 10 more members get added, you start losing control. So very important to understand what are the design factors in arriving at your governance system. And obviously, to look at some standard which doesn't dictate terms. So that is where COBIT comes in as a very, very useful, flexible guidance. And it obviously, you can pick up whatever you want. So of course, 2019 also clearly says it wants to dismiss certain wrong notions about COBIT. COBIT is not a full description of the whole IT environment of an enterprise. That is obviously not. It does touch upon every facet of IT. Yes, it does do that. Not only touch upon, it dwells into that in detail. It is not a framework to reorganize your business processes or whatever. You should look for some other standards. It is it a kind of a technical framework to manage technology? No, it is not. COBIT does not make or prescribe any IT related issues. So it is certainly not in any way prescriptive to really say this is what you should do. So you have a lot of, leeway on that. Now coming to the overview of how COBIT is organized. So if you are a ISACA member already, well, you can go into ISACA site and you can look at all these publications. You got an introduction methodology, which of course, as I said, is available to everybody. Then you have governance and management objectives, which are available to ISACA members. Then you have how to design an information and technology governance solution, which is a very useful guide as to what design elements are to be looked at and how to go about implementing. There is also the latest publication on your mobile, the focus factors, which also is now introduced. So to put it all in a nutshell, this is a slightly busy slide, but this will help you to understand how COBIT really works. And when you get, floored with questions saying, why should we go for COBIT? Why not other standards? Or, what does COBIT deliver? What all needs to be done? This kind of gives a bird's eye view. So starting with the left, of course, COVID 2019 started with a good foundation. We had already COVID 5. But what it added to was all the framework standards and regulations that came subsequently, and which was a stun. And there were a lot of research inputs from the academia, then from the business side, whole lot of inputs that came in. And all that now has gone into structuring the new reference model of governance and management objectives, which is the COVID core, which they call it now. There are 38 broad domains. Now, if you go how to implement that, it considers two important areas. One, the design factors. For example, you cannot define an IT framework without considering what is your enterprise strategy, what is your enterprise goals, what is the size of their enterprise, what is the role of IT, what is the sourcing model for IT, what are the compliance requirements. There are a whole lot of things which you'll need to consider depending upon the size and nature of your organization. So these are called as design factors. Obviously, these are the fundamental pillars on which you will build your IT governance and management framework. Then the need definition. It is not necessary you have to go and pick out all these 38 objectives and start working on them. Absolutely not necessary. If you see, the focus factors are there. For example, I am an SME. I want to look at something to solve my problems of IT management, or how do I take my business against the competition. So these are some of the questions that are getting asked. Or somebody could have saying that, oh, we are having too many certifications of IT, but management and governance of security is a problem we are facing. So how do we handle that? Well, you can focus only on that filter and select the relevant components. Or it could be focused on IT risk management, technology, information risk management, which is also something which could be one of your objectives. Or today we are saying, oh, we are on DevOps, and our DevOps doesn't have a proper strategy. We are looking at a good governance model for DevOps, is also something which many organizations have looked at. So these are some of the examples. So the focus areas kind of tell you which components of COVID 2019 could be interesting for you, considering your need. So that is what results in your tailored enterprise governance system for your information and technology. So what does it provide? Of course, it helps you prioritize governance and management objectives. It provides specific guidance from the focus areas point of view. So you don't have to go about dealing with too much of the text of COVID. Then also, very importantly, it helps you measure at whatever level. It's not necessary, oh, only after you implemented everything you can measure. No, even if you implemented security alone, you can start measuring your capability performance. Now, there is one important thing to understand with regard to capability. See, when you are implementing an ISO 27001, it is either a pass or a fail. But then organizations don't really work like that. Today, I did reasonably well. Tomorrow, the same thing I could do somewhat better. And the next year, I may want to move to the next level. So it is always a capability and maturity. So that is why it helps you to first gauge where are you with regard to your capability maturity, and then target a particular capability maturity vis-a-vis a particular process and achieve it. So that is where I think it really comes in. So I hope that has given you an idea of how this COVID architecture works. And you have all these guides which are mentioned at the bottom. Of course, you also now have the focus areas of COVID which are also published. I will stop here for any questions that you may have. If you understood the architecture well broadly, of course, we'll dwell into some aspects of architecture. I hope it is not too boring. Okay. I've been trying to take as much of practical examples. How much time more do we have, sir?
Yeah, we have enough time. It's 11 to 1, including questions.
Okay.
So,
wonderful.
Almost 50 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you. So let's move ahead. I think as of now, there are no other questions. And thanks for the feedback of those who said it is interesting. I'm glad it is interesting. Okay. us get into some practical areas, but which are defined as concepts in the COVID 2019 literature. Now, as I said, like the captain's job, you remember, you look at the external and the internal. Both sides you have stakeholders. When you have stakeholders, stakeholders have expectations. And when you have expectations, obviously it is important to consider these expectations and factor it into your enterprise governance system. So that is why one of the fundamental starting points for any governance system is ask this question: who are my external and internal stakeholders? So this slide is an example of some stakeholders. If you see external stakeholders, of course, one of them will be your customers, isn't it? You can call them by whatever name, but they are your ultimate, people who will decide to significant, level the fate of the organization. Then you could have business partners, you have regulators, you have, employees, you have IT vendors at large. But then when you come to the internal stakeholders, now you are dealing with various people in various positions. Like you have the board members. They have certain expectations, they have certain responsibilities. Then you have the executive management. Again, similar. Then business managers, IT managers, assurance providers, and risk management. So if you take, for example, like a bank which has to meet the cybersecurity regulations, please understand that it is a board's responsibility to ensure that all the cybersecurity regulations are met in letter and spirit. Otherwise, your reputation is at stake because you get into bad news. But more importantly, the RBI also levies penalties, and it can certainly reflect on the board performance significantly. Obviously, it has to be mentioned as part of your annual report as well. So these are all not good things to have. So obviously, there is a role for the board. If you look at the executive management is always directly under the auditee status of whenever these audits or inspections are happening, and whenever the implementation responsibilities start coming in. So they have to understand what are the business objectives of each of these security controls, how much can we invest in them, and appropriately design one to see that it is achieving the objectives and will help the organization achieve the objectives going forward. The next thing is the business managers. Often business management don't participate in any information security exercise, which is a very clear indication of bad governance system, which means either the business managers have not been educated enough on why and what is in it for them, or possibly there is a cultural issue with regard to an organization. Very important that the business, please understand one thing. The IT department is only the custodian of whatever is happening. They are making happen the infrastructure, right from application right up to the data centers or whatever networks, etc. But it is for business. So if there is a sales guy, the sales head, who is the owner of sales data? Obviously, there is no two doubts that when it comes to sales information, sales data, the primary ownership falls on the head of sales. Now, does it mean that he has to understand all the technology? No. At the same time, he has to at least make sure he's asking the right questions to the IT management and to the, the governance management to make sure that his protection objectives and his, whatever that he needs to do vis-a-vis his security management is properly being managed. And obviously, he has to also do certain contributions in terms of making the framework more aligned to his needs, and at the same time also participate in security exercises. For example, doing a simple access audit of his team is very important, and also to very carefully look at the results of audit reports and see if the audit objectives itself are meeting his requirements. So there is a whole big role for business managers, unfortunately is completely ignored in most organizations. So which is why, governance fails, because IT managers would look at it as a custodial exercise. Okay, my server is working fine, but there are 600 servers in the organization. Server A is not equal to server B from a business perspective. Each of them has a completely different business criticality. So unless and until you put it in the context of the business and appropriately design the security controls or whatever controls, it is certainly going to result in a business failure. So that is where important to see that this is aligned. And assurance providers are very important because they are the ones who are continuously challenging this entire governance and management system, the security system, to make sure that they are moving, I mean, the design is perfect and no dimension has been missed out. And of course, you have the risk management team, which is continuously on the job to make sure the business alignment of the risks are completely adhered to and delivered as such. So obviously, the risk management team has a multiple role of really collaborating with various teams. It is unfortunate that the risk management team in many organizations only looks at business side of risks and very rarely into the details of IT side of risks. So you'll find in many organizations, the IT risk register is completely different from the enterprise risk register. So which is not the good thing to do, which is all indications of bad governance. So let us look at some of the key concepts. So the concepts that are important, we'll discuss upon some of them. I'm not sure we'll have time for discussing everything. Is first the principles. Now it is very important that whenever, even if you're starting with building a large building, where the foundation pile or the pillar should be placed is what will determine the entire fate of that building. Similarly, when you are looking at anything, the principles are very important because that is what guides the entire exercise. So many organizations don't focus on these principles. Those are not clearly defined or communicated. So very important to clearly outline the principles of why we need a governance system and then go ahead with the next step. The next is, of course, clarity with regard to what are my objectives that I want to achieve vis-a-vis my governance and management system. For example, I have seen that many of the boards, they get paranoid when a CISO comes to present because he talks some language which they don't understand. And then only thing they are happy is if everything looks green, it is fine. But if somewhere they are seeing red and it says that SQL injection vulnerability, now they don't understand what the damn thing means. And unfortunately, unless and until the CISO also completely understand the business perspective, he is not going to communicate in the same sense. So this is going to lead to a lot of gaps of knowledge and anxiety across. So that is why it is important that this common language is struck. And when you are addressing at the board level, it should be the board language. And that is what should be permitted. So that is where the governance and management objectives needs to be very clearly defined. Then you have the goals cascade, a very important dimension or component of the IT governance system, because you have to understand that today it's a two-way kind of movement. Business goals determining IT goals, IT enabler goals, whereas the reverse also holds true, because today a simple RPA can completely change the business model itself. So that is where goals cascade is also important. Then, of course, a clear understanding of what are the components that goes into a governance system. We'll look at it. And then, as I said, various focus areas, we'll discuss some of them because it depends upon every organization's need. And the design factors. What are the design factors that should be considered? So we talked about principles. Now there are two broad things when you're going to develop your own governance system. One is the governance framework. What is a framework? Framework is the basis or the foundational elements based upon which you want to construct your governance system. For example, what is your base conceptual model? I want to be a large private bank, but also delivering insurance services, also being a leader in providing, let us say, security trading or whatever. That could be a conceptual model. And what is it that you want to really look at it? The management governance, how much of openness and flexibility would be there, right? What is it that you really desire? And which are the standards you are looking at, the major standards to be aligned with? So these are just some examples of this. And if you take these principles and start constructing your governance system, then you ask the question, okay, now given that we are going to look at multiple businesses, please understand if a small NBFC is going to put up a server on AWS, it's a completely different proposition as compared to a payment operator putting up on a cloud service. These are completely two different business risks, business criticality, which have different regulatory dimensions, as you know, and also to look at the speed of business and the speed of risk materialization. Because like 2 years back, the Cosmos Bank, a 112-year-old, very successful bank, a very responsible bank, no doubt about it, they were hacked and almost close to about 94 crores was taken away by the hackers, all remotely sitting outside the country. Now, did Cosmos Bank not really do anything about security? Certainly not the case, because otherwise RBI would have cancelled its license. They did several things, but somewhere the sustainability of their security system, which is the governance, was lacking. And that is where, when changes happen, which are constant, one thing or the other falls apart with regard to security configuration or security architecture. And that can spell the disaster for an organization. The typical case with Cosmos Bank. The governance system was bad. It was not standing up to the base conceptual model of this business in which they were in. Considering today's environment, the same Cosmos back 10 years back with limited technology was all fine. But today, when the demands have increased with regard to digital banking, and when you are now exposing more and more of your data outside your organization, the entire risk dimension changes. The stakeholder perspective changes. Because when you're providing a mobile banking, or you're providing a direct transfer benefit or a UPI, things are different. So that is where we have to consider a whole lot of factors when you're constructing a governance system, sitting in banking, being such an organization with such value systems, and considering that you got to comply with RBI requirements, ISO 27001 standards, etc., etc. So that is where now you come to the principles of what determines your governance system. So you already have the principles of governance framework in place. You know that you are a regulated entity, you are subject to significant amount of regulation, all that you know. And with that, obviously, your governance system should be able to cater to those principles of governance framework. And that is where you have stakeholder value definition. Do you understand and articulate each and every set of internal and external stakeholders and what are their expectations? When you say expectations, both express and implied. Don't think that the stakeholder will come and tell you, you got to be a safe bank. No, he will not tell you that. She will simply come and put on social media saying that you are the worst bank. Have a holistic approach. You cannot say, oh, IT department responsible for IT governance. It is never going to happen. So you need a holistic approach considering the enterprise as a whole, the business, IT, compliance, support side. And the governance system also needs to be dynamic, given the fact that your technology is changing, business model is changing, fintechs are continuously challenging you. And of course, you have to make sure you have clarity regards what is the board responsible for, what is your various management teams responsible for. So it has to be tailored to your kind. Please understand, the Paytm kind of governance system will not fit Saraswat Bank or fit Cosmos Bank. So you have to understand that there are several factors which go into that. So these are the principles that decide that. So it needs to be tailored to the enterprise needs, and it has to be end to end. Why end to end? One vendor staff who is not well trained on security basic principles, and he leaves a particular system open to the internet. For example, many of them very wildly use GitHub for mobile app development, which is a fundamental mistake when you're using a freeware, and that to all your data code which is lying there. And obviously you have significant amount of exposure, and nobody checks to say whether this vendor is using a secure version of GitHub or an open version of GitHub. So that could be just one loophole, in spite of all the 99 good things that you did, 99 cybersecurity discipline that you had, one just loophole which would compromise the entire enterprise. And that is the power of cybersecurity, cyber crime. So that is where we have to be very, very mindful of the fact that we have a robust governance system. So when we say framework and system, I just spoke to you how that works as such. So there are 6 governance principles that we have already seen. I have explained that. So I'm just jumping that to the next level. We come to the governance and management objectives. Now, if you look at this on the top, you have the what is called as the governance objectives. You call them as EDM, which I told you is 3 broad domains of responsibilities: evaluation, direction, and monitoring or measurement. So if you really look at this, for example, I'm not going to the details, you find 5 objectives being defined there. And all this you will clearly see aligns with stakeholder expectations. Number 1, making sure that you have a good governance framework and it is well implemented and well maintained. Then you ensure benefits delivery. Obviously, the fundamental thing is your IT has to deliver in terms of both internal and external stakeholders, while ensuring that the risk is optimized. So calling for a very robust risk management system for IT, governance and management, and ensuring that the resource is optimized, obviously. And ultimately, if you see, you are constantly in touch with your stakeholders to understand if they are being managed well, you understand their expectations, changing expectations, everything. See, one of the key things, you take board room meetings nowadays, many of them happen over VC software, Zoom or whatever. See, many of the independent directors are just not comfortable with this kind of software. So the big question always is, what would you do to provide them assurance that yes, the governance of and the management of these is done in a manner that is as per best practices. So that is where COBIT can really help. And if you see here, the next 3 domains of objectives, you see that APO deals with align, plan and organize. So for example, let us say your bank wants to go in for a mobile banking system to be launched. Obviously the direction comes from the top, but then the executive management now needs to align what is the current environment, current technology with the expectations of the management. So that is where the upgradation would be required. Plan for various activities, because when you're opening up mobile banking, you know that the very ergonomic of that is different. The cyber security perspective is different. Everything is different. And organize the teams, because obviously you'll now need a mobile or digital banking management team, which has to have a different competency and obviously overseeing quite a lot of stuff. So that is where, if you see, all these things need to happen. And within that, if you see, you've got several sub-dimensions of that. Like for example, do you have a managed information and technology management framework, which means that you have a IT management framework and that is continuously maintained. The framework is maintained. So which means you are open and flexible with regard to that framework. You have a strategy and the strategy is also continuously maintained. You have an enterprise architecture, very important, that is maintained. You have innovation, that is also managed well. Portfolio, which is managed well. Budgets and cost managed well. Human resources, relationships, service agreements, vendors, quality, risk, security, data, everything needs management. From what dimension? Align, plan and organize. So once you have aligned, planned and organized yourself, next job is to implement it. Build, acquire and implement. So that is where we come to the next dimension, wherein you have programs, requirements definition, solutions identification and building, availability and capacity, organizational change, IT changes, IT change, acceptance and transitioning, knowledge, and projects. Now, if you really look at this, you will find that several organizations, they are having continuous chronic problems. For example, with capacity management. Every time they keep on facing this problem, saying capacity is not enough, or there is excess capacity which is not used in one side of the organization, and there is a demand for capacity in another part of the organization. So these are very, very common things. So do we have a very, very clearly implemented solution? then comes the biggest part of this entire exercise, which is deliver service and support. That is where you have managed operations, service request and incident management, problem management, continuity management, security management, business process controls management. So all these comes in as part of that. So which obviously, as you'll see, spread across the risk, the security and the audit teams. And then you have, if you see the right hand side, which deals with aspects relating to measurement, audit and monitoring. So if you see performance and conformance monitoring, system, internal control systems monitoring, then you have compliance monitoring, then of course you have assurance, which is audit. So if you see, it covers every aspect of the spectrum of, earlier known as processes in COVID 5 or the process reference model. Now it is called as the governance and management objectives. So each of them, if you take the publication, governance and management objectives, it defines in detail. It has a lot of detailing with regard to the domain name, what could be the focus areas, what is the governance and management objective name that is being discussed there, what is its purpose, then how does it align with the various goals, and what are the related components like processes, practices, related organization structure, examples, information flows, and what interconnects you have for managing this particular objective, people skills and competencies, policies and frameworks, culture ethics and behavior, and of course service and infrastructure applications that will support this particular management objectives to be effectively achieved. And of course, if you want to even go beyond that, you can also find links to the evidence. So all that is contained in the publication, which we had seen earlier. If you see this, the second publication here, governance and management objectives. So that is where you will get for each of these processes, or today as we call it as objectives, this detailed guidance on that. So you can very easily use one of them. For example, let us say you have a problem on incident management, incident reporting and management. You can simply just pick up that particular thing. You say, I just want to improve this process. That's all. I don't care about the rest of the things. You can simply go pick up that particular objective. Only thing, make sure that you have aligned governance structures which are available so that this will sustainably work, and implement those to the extent required for your purpose and organization. And believe me, you will get a very, very robust system which will help you to solve that problem in a sustainable manner if practiced properly. We have done this for several organizations. I can tell you several areas of COVID can be very profitably used, because the first thing you want is, can somebody show me a method, a usable method, and that is where it helps. So then we come to the goals cascade. As I said, this deals with starting with the stakeholder drivers and needs, and that obviously falls into the enterprise goals. But then today, because every enterprise, if it is not digital or it doesn't attend to the digital side, is kind of doomed for failure. So very important that you have alignment goals aligned with the technology, information and technology objectives. And obviously that is what feeds into what we just discussed, the governance and management objectives. So everything got to be aligned, and you would have seen that this also comes in the second aspect of goals cascade, as we saw. So that is where this also helps. Okay. Then coming to the components of a good governance system. So if you see here on the right hand side of the screen, there are about 7 aspects that are required today, and which obviously are determinants of a good governance system. You can see, if you start with the top center piece, which is processes, right? Then you have organization structures, but you see that the fundamental is principles, policies and procedures. So in turn, that is what kind of decides on the organization structure, that is what decides on the processes, and then appropriately you configure your services, infrastructure and applications, and accordingly make sure that you have the right kind of people, competent people who have right kind of skills, and very important to make sure that your culture, ethics and behavior are appropriately aligned, and these need a conscious effort to do that. Passwords can be shared, yes, but then the important thing is, what is the demonstrative leadership doing about it? So there are simple things, but which make a huge difference. Are we looking at, for example, cyber security only as a compliance need, or are we looking at it as a strategic need? Is an organization's culture that will tell. So the seriousness with which every level of management looks at it and invests their effort into that. So all that is what gets decided on that. So each of them have again been discussed at length in the design of governance system. And important to understand that each of them are needed at a particular degree depending upon the level of maturity you are targeting. So suppose you are at level 1, obviously you don't want to target level 5, otherwise it will be a very utopian kind of desire which never gets met. But you want to move from level 2 to level 4, great. So you know where is my current processes today, maturity of processes today. Then you know what to do to take it to level 4. So in each of these aspects, you can now look at it and appropriately work on those projects. And as I said, the other thing is to right size your governance project such that it is specific to what is your need or what is your pain point. So there is now several publications on focus areas, on certain focus areas, but this is something which I'm sure you can look at your organization and start building. So these are some examples as such. Then comes, okay, now you want to design your governance system. What are those factors which should be considered before really starting working on the design? So first and foremost, as I said, is enterprise strategy. What is your enterprise strategy? For example, let us say you want to start another marketplace which is going to compete with the Amazons and Flipkarts of the world. Obviously, you know what kind of enterprise strategy you need. Obviously, your enterprise strategy would have taken into consideration the external and internal environment and what kind of investment is required, what kind of capability on the technology is required, etc., etc. Then, obviously, you will also define your goals. So to say that, okay, where will I make a difference to this market, to the customer, and what all needs to go into that, and how will I make a difference in terms of my numbers? So that is where the enterprise goals, which aligns with the business plans, etc., etc., also comes in. Then you also have a very clear understanding of your downsides, which is where the risk profile comes in. The risk profile obviously needs a very robust risk management system to be kept continuously updated and alive. And then a very good understanding of either your current information and technology related issues, if you're starting as an existing enterprise, or if you're starting a new enterprise, obviously, what are the problems that you would face? And also consider the threat landscape. Obviously, here we're talking about the digital threat landscape. If you are going to operate anything to do with the banking side or payment side, obviously you have to be clear about what compliance requirements will apply to me, not only in India, but also overseas. For example, if you're operating in the European region, you know that GDPR would be applicable. Then look at what role IT has to play. How will you source your various IT hardware, software, services, and various paraphernalia for IT? Because mind you, you may be an organization which doesn't have enough funds to start with, but you can still partner. You can look at a very effective model of how to source your IT. There are many organizations that have grown like that. And also decide upon the right kind of IT implementation methods. What is going to be a technology adoption strategy? Will you just adopt technology as a leader, go ahead with trying out the newest technologies, but you are still good for failure, accepting the failure and continuously introducing new technology? So all these are very significant questions that need to be answered. And then, of course, very important, what is the complexity, size, and nature of your enterprise? So these are what ISACA has identified. as design factors, which are obviously futuristic looking, to see that your governance system, once designed, should have been factored on the right kind of combination of these elements so that it will bring you sustainable success. Then we come to deal with the next aspect, which is with regard to performance management. Now, as I said, there has been a significant departure from COVID 5 and COVID 4.1 with regard to how performance management is looked at. In fact, I'm always reminded of the saying by L. Codell, who is a management expert, and he said that if you are playing a game and if you are not keeping score, you are merely practicing. So anything, any investment, any effort that you have taken up and which is not measured, you are not serious about it, is what his inference is, which of course is very true. I'm sure all of us will agree. So when it comes to performance management with 2019, what ISACA has done is it has put in place a kind of hybrid system which it calls as COVID performance management tool, because it kind of helps you measure both your governance and management performance, and to measure over time with regard to maturity how they are performing. So idea is the idea of this particular tool is to make it as simple to understand and usability, of course aligned with the COVID model. It should be reliable, repeatable, relevant, flexible, all these of course which are very, very common for any smart objectives. So if you see, what has happened is from COVID 5, where we had the process assessment model and it was completely based upon 15504, which deals with process measurement, and 33,000, which is governance measurement. We went on now, as I said, with CMMI 2.0, which was the maturity capability model. And here now in 2019, it combines both. So that is where you have the COVID measurement model which comes in there, which measures both capability and maturity, not only with regard to processes, but also the other governance and management components which we just saw, which I just spoke to you. Various governance and management components. This is what we discussed. So you can measure the capability, maturity of each of them, as well as the processes, which is this. Each of them you can measure, and this is what ultimately contributes to the success of a implementation for governance system or management system. So what has happened is, because COVID 2019 CPM, the COVID maturity measurement model, is based upon CMMI as well as process capability. So it serves both. So obviously aligned with both. How it works obviously is a 0 to 5 structure, wherein you can arrive at your capability measure and to measure for how well a particular process is performing. So you can look at both capability and maturity, as I said, and each process activity is associated with the capability level. So you can say this is the level of capability that I must have, and how mature are we in achieving that level of capability. So each process activity is associated with the capability level, helps users to implement processes at a foundational level, and identifies future activities to be achieved at the next level higher of capability. So for example, if you take, okay, we are at capability level 2 and you want to move to 3, you know what is to be done because all that is given already there in that. So very simple, you can make use of that and measure it. And also you can further, decide upon what level of granularity you need with regard to each of those areas with regard to the maturity levels of COVID-19. So with regard to a particular capability, you can say how mature I am. Am I doing well? For example, you get these 5 levels: incomplete, initial, managed, defined, quantitative, and optimizing. So each of them, the capability levels, you can also measure the maturity of that. So that is how it is. Broadly, I given you the how it works. Of course, you can go into the details of how it does, which is based upon accepted standards today. So next comes is now how do we go about implementing, designing and implementing governance system. So when you start with, of course, as we already discussed, you have, when you are looking at design factors, what is the impact that they have or they could have on a governance system also needs to be understood. So you are looking at component variations that could come in, what specific focus areas you are selecting, and what is the management objective and priority target levels that you're looking at. Because if you're at, let us say, precision industry like medicine and pharmacology, now the equipment that you manufacture could be oximeter, but the precision levels are very high because here you are having life at stake. So obviously you have to target very high levels of capability and maturity both. So the overall design of how to go about designing follows these steps. Number one, of course, as I said, understand the enterprise, the context and the strategy. I already spoken in detail about this, how to do this. It obviously has to consider strategy, goals, risk, issues, etc. as we discussed. Then determine the initial scope of the governance system. So what do we want from it? Again, this should consider the strategy, rather factor that, and look at the goals cascade and apply the goals cascade. Consider the risk profile and provide for it appropriately, and the IT and INT related issues. Once we have done that initial scoping, then you again brainstorm through each and every layer of your organization and come up to identify the final refined scoping of the governance system. What is it that we are looking at? Now you would do scenario analysis. For example, with regard to a threat landscape, with regard to meeting compliance requirements, with regard to role of IT, with regard to sourcing model, with regard to implementation methods, adoption of IT strategy and the enterprise size. So you consider all these aspects and you arrive at, okay, these are all my considerations. And this is how my governance system should be to deliver to these requirements. And ultimately, of course, you will come across several conflicts when you are brainstorming between the business team, IT team, support teams, compliance teams, etc. So obviously that is where you have to arrive at the mid path or at a particular plan to say, okay, this is where we'll target now, and we will obviously target for going to this particular level by this time. Now, having designed this system, the next thing is to implement this system. So you now have a very clear conceptual system, a governance system that is fit for your organization, considering the specific factors that you want. So I quickly finish now. So the next thing is with regard to, as I said, the tailored governance system. This is very interesting because here you start with where am I and where do I want to be? Very simple. So that is where, if you see, you start with the wheel. It's a very popular wheel of COVID implementation. 1, 2, 7. First you start with what are our drivers, right? Where are we now? So what are our drivers? Very clearly at every level. If you see program management level, which is the outer box, then change management level, which is the middle box, middle circle, and continuous improvement life cycle, which is the ultimate core. So you are looking at starting at least with the external rail of program management, pushing in the change management, and making sure this becomes a continuous improvement life cycle. So that is where you clearly answer this question. What is it that is driving us to do all these things? Where are we now? Where do we want to be? Okay, what are the gaps and what do we need to do with to these gaps? And then how do we get there? And did we get there? Measurement. And how do we make sure we are continuously improving? This is how it shall go. So I am not getting into the details of major differences between COVID-5 framework and 2019 because we already discussed about that. But of course, as I said, the focus areas is certainly a new concept that has come in there, which helps to right size COVID to your needs. So of course, you can study through that, what all is removed, what all is done. because that would not be required. So with that, we come to the end of introduction to. I think now we'll have some time to take up questions. If somebody would have questions, that will be wonderful.